I read six classics in the month of May and I wanted to do a quick review of all of them. I hope you enjoy this, and if you have read any of these books, please let me know down in the comments what you think about them, or if you are planning to read them soon, let me know as well. So, without further ado, let's just jump right in. So, the first book which I'm going to talk about is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which is not coming into focus. Okay, yeah, there you go. So I had already watched the BBC miniseries, and the book is obviously so much better. It was such a quick and fun read. While reading this book, I found Isabella and her brother so interfering and so infuriating. I was so angry at them. As for Catherine, she was so naive. Henry Tilney is just so funny. I mean, he's a grammar Nazi. That's just so funny to read about. Um, so yeah, I am going to quote Henry here. I mean Jane Austen, but Henry is the one who says this, that the person, be it gentleman or lady, who has not pleasure in a good novel must be intolerably stupid, which is just like so true. Yeah, I gave this Northanger Abbey 5 stars on Goodreads. Obviously, Catherine was very young in this book, but it was just a very simple, very small book and a very fun and quick read. So, the next book which I read was Adam Bede by George Eliot. Now, this was the second book by George Eliot which I have read. I read Middlemarch a month or two ago, and Middlemarch is now one of my favorite books ever. Even though it was a challenge to read this, it took me almost a month to finish Middlemarch, but it is now one of my favorites. So I started Adam Bede because obviously this was by George Eliot. This was her first book, and the story is very, very different from Middlemarch. The story is very simple. Now, the characters in Adam Bede, obviously there is Adam Bede, and then there is his love interest, Hetty Sorrel. To be honest, I did not like Hetty at all, and I could not understand why Adam preferred her. I thought Hetty was very selfish and very self centered, and I had no sympathy for her at all. She seemed like a psychopath to me, actually, which is just crazy. She had no feelings for anyone except for herself, and there was such a contrast between her and Dina. But I guess that is the point of those characters, they are exactly opposite to each other. I just like the way George Eliot writes. I prefer her writing style. And the last book in Adam Bede was the best because everything was so nicely rounded up. And as for Seth Bede, I just felt so sorry for him. But yeah, I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. If you like Middlemarch, then consider reading Adam Bede. If you're not a fan of George Eliot, then I don't think you're going to enjoy it as much. But I really enjoyed it, and I am very excited to read more books by George Eliot. The next up, which I'm going to read, is The Mill on the Floss. The next book which I read in the month of May was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This was a reread for me. I've already read this so many times, but I think I've not read this in the last 5 or 6 years. So I bought this new edition and I wanted to reread it, and it was so much fun. It is still a 5 star rating for me, still one of my favorite books, and I was just so happy to read this. This also had some amazing illustrations which just made everything so much better. I mean, there was an illustration on almost every page, and as you can see, I have highlighted quite a lot of things because I just love every sentence there is in Pride and Prejudice. And I mean, I don't know if this is weird or if any of you do this, but I usually smell my books, and this book smells great. So yeah, this is one of the Wordsworth Classics edition. 5 stars, Pride and Prejudice, best book ever. So the next book which I read was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I gave this 3.5 stars on Goodreads. It was obviously not what I was expecting. I really enjoyed the descriptions which Mary Shelley gave of the mountains and the sceneries and the travels of Frankenstein. I have traveled quite a lot myself. All the details that she gave about the mountains and the oceans, I would have given Frankenstein a higher rating, but the thing which bugged me was that Mary Shelley mentioned Muslim women here, and I quote that Muslim women are forbidden the independence of spirit. I mean, why? That's not true. And I hate when people assume stuff about religions and races which they don't know much about. I get that this book was written in the 18th century, but I still can't give it a higher rating. I think I'm going to find more books which Mary Shelley wrote because I enjoy her writing. I'm not sure whether she did, and if she did, if those books are available in Pakistan. The next book which I read was The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. Now, this was such a highly recommended book on BookTube, and one of my friends read this and also recommended it to me. So I started reading this. I think it took me almost 10 days to finish this. It was a very thick book. I have given this 5 stars on Goodreads. I really enjoyed the story. It was so different. I couldn't believe this was written in the 18th century. I have already read Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, and it is also one of my favorite books. If I had to choose one of those two, I mean, it's very tough, but I think I will prefer Agnes Grey because that was the first book which I read, and it's just a simple, sweet story. I also really enjoyed this one. I mean, I wasn't even able to tell that Agnes Grey and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall are written by the same person because the two stories are so different from each other, and the narrative styles are also very different. Both very impressive but different. Now, as for The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, this book is divided almost into 3 parts, and the whole book is told in the form of letters, which in the beginning I found a bit weird, but when I reached the second half of the book, the things got better. The second half of the book is the diary of Helen, and it was so much more fun to read. Her writing was more fun, more entertaining. There was Helen, who was so sensible and so mature, and then there was Mr. Markham, who was, I think, a little bit immature. He was a little too emotional, but I guess that got balanced out because Helen was very mature. I would highly recommend this book because this deals with alcoholism and how that can affect a marriage, and I thought that those themes were very nicely handled in this book. So the last book which I want to talk about is The Odd Women by George Gissing. This was the first book which I finished in the month of May, but since I do not have a physical copy of it, I thought I will talk about it in the end. I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. This book was definitely a page turner. I was hooked from the first chapter. I was so intrigued by the story. I had no idea what was going to happen, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. There is no movie or TV adaptation, so I had to actually read the book to find out what was going to happen. There are 2 consecutive plot lines in this book. The first one is about Rhoda Nunn. I really enjoyed that one. She had amazing conversations with this guy called Everett about feminism, about jobs, about women in the society and marriage, which were just amazing, and I was looking forward to their conversations when I was reading the book. Then there's the second plot line, which is about this girl called Monica. Now, Monica's husband was a jealous, a stalker kind of person, and the things which he said in the book were just making me so angry. The things which Monica did were not right as well. There were a lot of opinions expressed in this book, and I cannot say that I agree with all of them, but overall it was a very feminist work, and the best part is that this book was written by a man in the Victorian era. I don't know why this book is not more famous. I'm going to share one quote with you, which is, "I believe married life is no easy thing, even when the people are well matched. I have heard the most dreadful stories of quarreling and all sorts of unhappiness between people I thought safe from any such dangers, which I think is so true. So, those were the mini reviews of the 6 classics which I read in the month of May. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to give this video a huge thumbs up. Bye.